Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Welcome to DWS View. Stand up. If we do not stand up for what we believe, who will? This is Dolores Williams. And today I have the privilege of interviewing a great lady that I have a lot of respect for. Her name is Ruth Wise, and Ruth is a tremendous force to deal with when it comes to election integrity. And Ruth, good morning. I'm so thankful to have you here for this interview today. And I'm just going to let you take it away and tell us about EIPCA.
Oh, thank you, Dolores. It's a delight to be here. And I thank you so much for all the support you've given over the years. And Dolores is one of our community coordinators for Election Integrity Project California. So she's deep in this too. Election Integrity Project was actually founded in December of 2010. We are now almost into our 10th year of doing this work. And we became a for-profit corporation at the beginning simply because of the political environment, obviously not to make money, we never did, but then in 2017, the political environment changed and we were able to get our 501c3 designation. So now we are a fully 501c3 tax-exempt public benefit corporation here in the state of California. We have always been nonpartisan. We work very hard to be nonpartisan because election integrity and the integrity of maintaining the ability of the people's voice to be heard accurately is not a partisan issue. It's an American issue. And so we want to fight and stamp out any kind of fraud or election corruption wherever we can find it. So what we do is, there are about 4 things that are the main things that we do, and one of which is that we create teams in each county as we get people who step up into leadership, and then that county coordinator attempts to make community teams so that each community can be protected with a team. Those teams then go out and they try to get volunteers. We are an all-volunteer organization at this point. We don't make money, we don't get money. We simply have a labor of love and patriotism. And so our volunteers get trained. We train them very well in what California election law is so that they know the way the election should be conducted. And then they go out to the polling places and they observe what's going on there. We also teach them, according to California law, how they can intervene when there are some anomalies going on that they're observing that they think is bothering the integrity of the election. And we allow them to call our hotline to get assistance if they need it. And we have been able to really save a lot of situations that have been going on during the voting process. And that's a very important thing. But another thing that we really are working hard to get more observers to do is to go and watch the processing of the ballots. Unfortunately, the majority of the people in California do cast a vote by mail ballot. And those vote by mail ballots are so vulnerable to abuse and loss and manipulation. And so it's important that we have eyes on the process, and California law gives us the right to do that. So we send volunteers to the counting centers for the entire 60 days, if possible, that ballots are being processed. And they look to see that signature verification is happening properly. They look to see that ballots are not being opened wrong and destroyed, because when that happens, and we have seen that, then those ballots have to go to a pile to be copied over. And of course, the copying over process can create error or intentional bad doing to duplicate someone's ballot in a way that they didn't cast it, and then you manipulate votes. So we watch the entire process, and we need more and more volunteers to do that, people to step up and say, I care about the results of my election. Just casting a vote is not enough, because if you don't watch how it's counted, you may not have your voice heard appropriately. So that's the big part of what we do, but we have an amazing data team. And our data team analyzes the voter rolls, and every couple of months they bind the voter rolls again, and they analyze them, and they go through them, and they put out information which we now not only share with the registrars and with the Secretary of State, but we share with the public, because the public needs to know and be part of putting pressure on our public officials to clean the voter rolls and make sure that there aren't people that shouldn't be receiving ballots. Right now, we have a big challenge going on because of the COVID crisis. California is deciding to mail every person in California who's a registered voter a vote by mail ballot, whether you've asked for it or not. And the problem with that, well, there are a lot of problems with that, but one major problem is that our last sweep of the data, which was very recent, showed almost 500,000 people on the voter rolls who have shown no activity whatsoever, at least since November of 2008. However, the vast majority of them have a much longer period of time of inactivity. So we suspect, and our numbers are very conservative, it's a very good bet that these 500,000 people are either deceased or they've moved out of the state. And that's why they're no longer interacting electorally. And all we are asking the legislature to do is to send them the federally mandated postcard that says, hello, we haven't heard from you. Do you still want to be on the voter rolls? Because when those cards come back undeliverable, or if they come back with some information on them, then they can adjust the voter rolls accordingly. As long as those people stay on the voter rolls, we will be sending out 500,000 ballots in California in October to addresses that have no legitimate recipient at the other end. And of course, we have an atmosphere of ballot harvesting now in California, where there's no accountability or chain of custody to what happens to ballots after they get handed over to somebody. So all of those 500,000 ballots could be voted by an individual who's unscrupulous and wants to just put an extra vote in, or they could be sold or handed over. They could be thrown in the trash, which would be the most common thing. If you get a ballot that belongs to somebody else delivered to your house, most people don't know that they should make sure that gets back to the registrar, because that helps them to clean the rolls. They'll just throw them out in the trash or the recycle bin, and those can be picked up from those bins as well. We had reports in one county of people who are going to their mailboxes at the post office, and you go through your mail right there, and the stuff that's junk you just put in the trash can before you leave. And we had reports of people putting their ballots in the trash, which meant it either wasn't their ballot or they didn't particularly care to participate, and other people coming along and fishing those ballots out of that trash can. And certainly there's no good that can come of that. So our data team is doing great work to try to help get the voter rolls cleaned up. There isn't any political will to do that from Sacramento right now, but we're continuing to work on it. And we're continuing to push. And then the third most important thing that we do is we follow legislation. And that's really been the problem with California in the last, say, 10 to 15 years, is that there's been a series of bad legislation, some of it at least on the surface for good reason, to make sure that everyone has easier access to the whole process, so that everybody who wants to vote and is eligible to vote gets to vote. But now we have put convenience and ease so far ahead of protecting the integrity of the process that the integrity has eroded to the point we have almost none now in California. And you don't want to make that sacrifice. So we continue to follow legislation, communicate with our legislators, testify at hearings, just to make our voices heard. So far, in Sacramento, they're not listening, but actually we had a really great victory in the last couple of days that if you want, I can tell you about later.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the last thing that we do is that we have gotten into the realm of litigation. We have 2 active lawsuits going right now because Ventura County and Fresno County are denying the public the right to observe their process, and we have that right legally in California. So there are 2 lawsuits that are stalled because of COVID, because the courts are closed. Our lawsuit against Ventura was supposed to have been heard March 30th, but they closed the courts down for the pandemic. So until they're hearing things again, we're just kind of in limbo. And then we are really discussing 2 or 3 more lawsuits that need to be filed in order to hold registrars accountable for what they are doing to really manipulate elections. So we work hard. We do whatever we can with whatever money that the good Lord brings our way. And we basically hope that more people will recognize that in order to continue to keep the voice of the people active in California, we need to do more than just cast a vote. We need to step up, and we need to be volunteers, and we need to keep an eye on things. And we value participation that anybody can do, whether you have skills that would help us with the data analysis or skills that would help us with things like social media, writing, blogging, certainly people who will step up and lead their communities and gather a team together. So we have all kinds of things that we could use support, and of course prayer. We ask everyone to support us in prayer, if nothing else, because that's really what's going to give us the victory.
Amen. Oh my goodness. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about the process where people can call in to the legislature and be a part of when you have those sessions like you did last week? When they're considering bills, constituents can actually call in and be a part of that process.
This has been kind of a silver lining in that COVID cloud, because traditionally what they do is as the bill goes through the process of committee hearings and then onto the floor, the only way that the public can weigh in on their opinions, of course, they can send an email or a letter to their own legislator. They can make a phone call, of course, but to actually be heard, you have to go all the way to Sacramento and get into the committee hearing. Well, that's a very difficult process, and most of us live, like I do, 500-600 miles away from there, and so it's been very hard. And we do have a wonderful group of people up in that area who have gone on our behalf to some committee hearings and testified for us. But now, because of the COVID crisis, they can't let people into the Capitol. So they have had to make these hearings accessible telephonically to anyone who wants to call in to hear the hearing and to speak up at the hearing. And so that's what we experienced this last week, is that and one time, I think the week before, we were able to get people to call in and say, yes, I am in support, or I am in opposition of this particular bill. And it was very exciting to sit there and hear hundreds of people who had called in because we put out the call, and they were allowed to give their name and that where they were from or what group they were affiliated with, and they were able to say what their position on the bill was. And we literally had hundreds of people do that on our behalf. The opposition only had 10 or 15 people call in, and because the people who generally oppose our position on almost every bill are the same groups of people out there, and they just have people they pay to be these activists, and they just go in and support, but they don't get the troops, so they don't hear from the public. So this was a very exciting thing to happen, and it actually helped. This is the bill that was backing up the governor's executive order to send out these vote by mail ballots. And one of our concerns was that the language was not clear, and it might have been able to be interpreted to send ballots to people on the inactive voter list. These are people who have been sent those cards, they came back undeliverable, so they were moved to an inactive list, and by federal law, after 2 more election cycles without any activity, they're canceled. But while they're on the inactive list, they're eligible to vote. And so if those ballots were sent out, that would be another 400, almost 5 million ballots.
Oh.
Additional ballots sent out to people that aren't there anymore. And so one of the asks that we had is, if you're going to do this, at least clarify the language. And the governor's language was not clear, and then this bill that backed up the governor's language was not clear in the same way. So they voted down that particular amendment in the committee meeting, but later that afternoon, the governor amended his own executive order and made that clarification. And today they have put out an amendment to that bill echoing the amendment that we asked for in that hearing. So we were heard, the pressure did help. And so the more people who can just from the convenience of their own homes, pick up the phone and call in at a given time, it's very exciting. Now this bill has other real issues to it, and it's going to be heard in the Appropriations Committee next Tuesday. And so I'm going to put out a notice today asking people to call in for that as well.
Amen. Amen. You see the impact that EIPCA has in election fraud and just keeping these people accountable for what they are elected to do. And what a shame that we have to do that.
They live in a bubble, you know.
Yeah.
You talk to representatives at the federal level or the state level, and they'll all admit it. Once they get there, they live in a bubble and they no longer know what's going on the ground. And it's very hard to keep their feet on the ground and stay focused. And it's very hard to understand the damage that they're doing with certain pieces of legislation. And they do need to hear from the people. So we're going to push to make this telephonic testimony something that is permanent, even after COVID is over, because it's more likely to make them realize that they represent you and that they're not making decisions up there in their ivory tower without affecting you.
Amen. Now, can you reassure the voters about the opportunity to vote in person? Because I mean, you know, I have a big problem with people not being able to vote in person and to force everyone to vote by mail. And can you talk to us about that? I know there's opportunity, but reassure people that those who want to vote in person, explain how they will be able to do that.
Absolutely. Right now, the situation is a shifting sand because all of the details are not in place yet. But I can tell you what it appears to be is going to be the end game. The people who want to vote in person, and we beg you to do it if you can, and it won't be quite as easy this time because they're not going to be staffing as many public places. You know, all of your precincts that you're used to going to are not going to be available this time. There are a lot of reasons for that. Number one is they're worried about COVID, and they have to find places to host polling places that have the ability to do the social distancing and all of that kind of stuff that can't be done in the tiny garages and stuff where you often go to vote. So they're looking desperately for places to do this. Then also the idea of getting the people to staff those places. A lot of our poll workers are the older people who are retired and have the time to give that whole day, and that's just delightful. But it's very important for us to have people who are not city and county employees, who all belong to the same union, out there doing what they can to protect our voting process. So the difficulty of finding people to staff these locations and finding the locations themselves means they're going to be limited. It appears that the latest suggestion will be that there will be one polling place, in-person polling place, required for every 10,000 voters in the location, which is about the ratio they have for the vote centers in counties that do the vote center thing. So it may be more difficult for you to get to a location to vote in person, but if you are philosophically in alignment with us and believe that in person is the way to cast a much safer vote, then you know, make that plan. And organizations can get together and offer people rides to the polls. People who aren't concerned about their health, or people who can, you know, protect themselves on their way out, realize that protection will be in place in those polling places, and then have those people offered rides. You know, churches and other organizations should say, we'll take you to the polls. And I think we can help each other out there and get more and more people out of this slavery of voting in by mail, because it really is slavery, because you have the illusion of voting, but you never know for sure whether your vote is counted the way you cast it.
Amen. Now, one other thing I'd like to talk to you about is encouraging people in other states not to adopt the California way of voting, because, you know, they have a saying, what starts in California, unfortunately, doesn't stay in California. So we want to encourage the whole country please do not adopt California ways. And do you have any contact with people in other states to
Oh,
encourage them to fight against this?
absolutely. The one thing that California has done right is to give the public the right to observe every aspect of the electoral process. And other than North Dakota, that's not true in any other state. So the first thing we're doing is working with other states to get them to work with their legislators to give the public the right to observe their own political process the way we have that right in California. And they're fighting that battle in Arizona. EIP has now 3 LLCs underneath our 503C umbrella. So we have EIP Nevada, EIP Arizona, and EIP Arkansas. So that is going well. We have other states that are looking in that direction. We are also part of an election integrity alliance where we share best practices and work with organizations that do the same kind of work that we do in other states so that we can support them. And then the purpose of that alliance is to help states that don't have organizations like ours to develop one. And we can give them the tutoring and the mentoring and the support until they can get on their feet. So we're trying to spread out that way. And then of course, a lot of work that we're doing through the federal government. We're now in touch with the DOJ, and we're the only citizen organization that was invited to join a national task force on election integrity for the 2020 election. And so we're very excited to be working with some very big names in the election area in that regard. So yes, we're working everywhere we can with states to try to convince them not to go the California way. Right now there's a big battle in North Carolina because and in Arizona over the same thing, and that is that they're trying to enact California's ballot harvesting law and put it in place for 2020. And of course that's a disaster. And Arizona's people have now gotten to the point they're petitioning the Supreme Court to hear their case. And we filed, with the help of Landmark Legal Foundation, an amicus brief to the Supreme Court saying, please hear this case. So we'll see how that goes. In North Carolina, again, the fight is big. The legislature is trying to pass their bill to allow ballot harvesting. And North Carolina's been struggling for a long time with the fact that they have passed 2 or 3 times a bill for voter ID. And every time somebody challenges it, and the courts, the liberal courts back there, are striking their bill down. So we're working with them very closely. We're helping any state that needs some help. We're trying to give them guidance. And so we feel pretty excited about the expansion of our impact.
Hey, man, that is wonderful news. You know, it just amazes me that people do not want to show an ID when they vote. But we have to show ID for everything else. And our vote is the most important thing that we can do. It's a privilege for us to be able to vote, but to not show ID. I hope that the states will hold on to that. You know,
well, Dolores, let me tell you that people do want to show their ID. I mean, yes. across every group of people that you can imagine, whether it's ethnic or socioeconomic or whatever however you pull this, there is a 70 to 80% desire for a photo voter ID in this country. So it's not the people who don't want it. It's the legislators who don't want to give up their opportunity to manipulate the election, who continue to disallow the voter ID laws. Now, there are 26 states that do have some form of voter ID required. Most of them are soft ID. So rather than photo ID, they have to show something like a utility bill or something like that to prove who they are. But then the rest of the states have nothing. You simply show up, tell them what your name is. They have to accept that as correct, even if they know it's not correct, and they have to give you that person's ballot. And James O'Keefe and his group 2 or 3 elections ago did a lot of sting operations showing how these people could walk in and get anybody's ballot. They walked in and claimed to be Eric Holder.
Yes.
And the poll worker gave him Eric Holder's ballot, offered to. So, you know that it can and it does and it will happen in these states that have no protection. And so that's something too that we need to be fighting for. Let's ask ourselves for voter ID. The states that require it have a way for anyone who needs that ID to obtain it free of charge. It's not a burden on anybody, and it really does protect the vote. So, and the people do want it. We just need to get the courts and the political activists out of the way.
Oh, yes, that is so true. I know this last election we were observing, and we had people come in and they wanted to show their ID. They had their ID out, and the poll worker said, no, we cannot look at your ID. We can't accept your ID.
Yeah.
And that's sad that the legislature doesn't respect the vote of the people and the voice of the people, because that's a big concern. Ruth, do you have any final words you'd like to share with us?
Just, keep your eyes open, do your research, stay in touch with us. We want everybody to go to our website and sign up to be on our email list, because that's where you get the legislative alerts and the hints to the voters for how to cast their votes in the safest way possible. So our website is www.eip-ca.com. And if you go to that website, you can reach the website of the other 3 states that are working with us as well, and you can sign up to receive our emails. And we don't inundate you with the emails, but it's very important that people hear what we give you, because it will be a big surprise to you to find out some of the things that you don't know until you go through our training, until you read some of our stuff. So we do ask people to be in touch with us. Go to our website, donate to us if you can, because we can only do our legal work or even keep our business paid for if we get donations, and definitely keep us on the top of your prayer list.
Amen. Thank you so much, Ruth. You've just been a tremendous blessing today. And we want this information to go far and wide, and we encourage everyone and to share. And to all of you who are listening to this interview, and those of you who are, whether you're listening or whether you're looking at this interview, I want to encourage you to share this video, share this information far and wide with everyone you know, and support EIPCA. I know Ruth, and she does a tremendous job. God has blessed her with a jewel to do the things that she does, because not everyone would be so committed to do the work, and it's hard work, but she is committed, and she deserves our support.
Thank you, Dolores. And one last word of advice: do not give your ballot to a ballot harvester that you don't know and trust implicitly. If you're going to have someone else submit your ballot for you, make sure you know that person is going to do the right thing with your ballot. Don't just give it to someone who comes knocking on your door that you don't know well and say, oh yeah, I'll turn your ballot in for you, because that's one way to get your ballot manipulated for sure. Definitely take responsibility to cast your own vote by doing your own homework, and then cast your vote as safely as possible. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Ruth. And I want to encourage every one of you to stand up for what you believe, and stand up for what's right, not just what we believe. We got to make sure that our beliefs align with the Word of God. And that's why I'm doing these interviews, because I'm trying to align with the Word of God, and He's using me to get a message out. And I'm yielded to that. So I want you to go to DWS View and stand up with me. Stand up for what you believe. And I need your support. Ruth needs your support. And I'm just thankful to have a team supporting me. And I just want to encourage you, please don't forget to hit that red button to support DWS View. Support and share my message. And to God be the glory, and I just give thanks to Him for this time. Amen.
Amen.